This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we finished job order costing. We took a little bit of time to make sure everybody could get that done. And so now we move to joint product costing where we have to cost more than one product. Now you should be working on your project. And what you should be doing, as you see there, covers and all of that. So you need to buy your raw materials and make that product and be able to tell me what are the raw materials costs and what's the labor cost for one item. Okay, one item. We're always doing things based on one item. So you should be in the process of doing that. Timetable wise, we will, over the next 3 class periods, finish the 2 chapters, one joint product and then process costing. It is pretty much a repeat. Uh, so we'll go through that and you'll have a in-class problem each time and you'll have a study problem. On April 1st, we'll be moving to uh, variable costing and cost volume profit analysis. And we will probably spend about a week on that. Once we finish that up, then you'll be able to finish stage 2 of the project. But what you need to do is to make that project and come up with your costs. And then as we get into that, as we go through that material, we'll go over what stage 2 needs to look like, your second 25 points. And of course, you're making those projects so that you can mail them to me. So as if you were selling them to me for your value. That is, you're sending them to me because you got this valuable education. So you're paying your professor for your valuable education. Any questions? Okay, when we make more than one product, some issues do come into play. Suppose we got 2 products. Product A, direct materials 4, direct labor 5. Then we have product B, making 100,000. We have product B, direct materials 3, direct labor 2. So I'm making 2 books. I'm doing 100,000 on principles. I'm doing 50,000 on intermediate. Manufacturing cost is $50,000. And that 50,000, I use it for both books. I use the same computer, same room, same utilities. So all of that is, utilized for both books. So the question is, how much of the overhead is going to each book? Because before I can do the pricing, I got to have a unit overhead cost for each book. And so I got to, have some procedures in place so I can appropriately send that, allocate that overhead so I can get a selling price. And I got to be competitive, so I have to do a good job. So how are we going to allocate the $50,000? And we're going to do something similar to weighted average depreciation. We're going to come up with an activity rate to come up with a way to allocate that cost. So, big new thing that we're dealing with. And one of the things about an activity rate, when we calculate it, it also becomes the POR, the predetermined overhead rate. So when we get this activity rate, it also will serve as our POR. That cuts back some of our work. So we have a situation, and we'll be starting off with, and our problem will be using one allocation basis labor hour to get this allocated cost to each product. And so 50,000 is this overhead. And let's assume 60,000 is the amount of labor hours in making book A. 40,000 is the amount of labor hours in making book B. So 60,000 and 40,000. I'm going to add these two numbers together, and so total hours involved is 100,000. Then I'm going to divide 100,000 into the 50, and this gives me an activity rate, or weighted average rate of 50, something we did when we were working with weighted average inventories. So we see the calculation. Now, eventually, I'm giving you the hours, but we'll have ways to calculate hours. But we simply add up the quantities of hours, get the total hours, divide it into, and we get the activity rate, which would be our POR. So let's look at the next thing we're gonna do. And let me clear it out. So I can go back through it. And you'll see everything that goes in. So now I'm gonna work on, okay, how much 50,000 is going to each product, product A and product B. So the first thing I do is I bring down my product labor hours. So I copy these and I put these in. So I've got 60,000 labor hours for A and 40 for B. Then I'm gonna get my activity rate, which I just calculated. I'll put my activity rate in. Then to allocate the overhead between product A and product B, I multiply the activity rate times the hours. So 50 cents times 60,000 is how much?
30,000.
30,000. And 50 cents times 40,000 is what?
20,000.
And we add those together, how much do we get?
50,000.
So that's $50,000. So now we have allocated the overhead to each item. Now we need our expected production numbers in here. And we said that we're going to produce 100,000 of A and 50,000 of book B. And so we now are going to divide 130 and 150 so we can get the product unit overhead. That is on a per unit basis, what is our overhead? So 100,000 divided into 30 is how much? Divide 100,000 into 30, what are we probably going to get?
$3.30, 33 cents, $3.33, or 3.
Now, this is the top number. This is the bottom number.
Oh. 0.33?
About
Yeah.
0.30.
Yeah, that. Sorry.
It's 0.30.
What's it going to be for product B?
0.4.
0.4. So now,
Are you meaning to put that in the selling price multiple?
no, thank you. I need to move it up. Okay. And I think these selling price multiples will make 2 and 3. So what I've done, I had an overhead of $50,000. I've calculated an activity rate. And then I've allocated that, the total overhead to each product. I divided by how many I expect to produce to come up with that unit overhead cost. So what's the next thing we need to do now? Got to come up with a selling.
Manufacturing overhead, right?
We're going to fill out this chart to come up with the unit cost of product A, selling price and POR, unit cost of product B, selling price and POR. We'll see if y'all can take 5 minutes to fill the chart out. Now, I sent this handout to you all, correct? For those who looked in Blackboard. So you should have the information. So this is product A, materials and labor, product B, materials and labor. You got your overhead 0.4. So we're doing a similar thing, that we have two products. We have product A, product B. I want to now to calculate total unit cost and selling price for product A in the POR, total unit cost and selling for product B and the POR. Y'all just finished doing this, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it shouldn't be taking too long, right?
I don't know. It'll probably take me a little while because I'm slowpoke Dawkins, right? So it's gonna take me a minute.
Do not make it hard. That's the key. Don't make this hard.
I'll do what I can.
Are you
All right.
ready for the answers, or are you just like
Product A, how much is the direct materials,
$4,
direct labor,
$5,
overhead,
so the overhead for product B is 100,000, and
Kayla.
I'm talking this out loud, right?
Yeah, don't do my friend like that.
Dang,
I
man, let me make it.
What's our total unit cost?
$9.30.
Selling price multiple. So what's selling price?
Ooh.
The multiple for that one was 2. It's like 1860.
What's our POR? What is our POR?
Can you go back up real quick?
Isn't it 0.5?
0.5. Thank you, Hines. We said the POR is the activity rate. So you know what an activity rate does now. So we went through a long way of calculating it last, in the last material, so you get a sense of it. But now you see a POR and you know what it's going to be used for. What's going to be used for? Product B, what's the direct materials?
$3,
Labor,
$2,
already got our unit overhead cost in here. So what's the total cost?
$5.40. $5.40.
Selling price?
$16.20.
Yeah, because selling price multiple. What's the POR?
50 cent, 0.5.
Okay, so any questions on what we've done there? So you can see, you
I got a question. I do. When we so like for let's say an exam or whatever, are you and we're doing the exam based off of this? Are you gonna always have the activity rate, or do we have to calculate it beforehand and then use it?
got to calculate it and use it, Dawkins.
Oh, well, you could just say like you could have just made it a little bit better by like saying you're gonna have it sometimes. Because you know the last time we just had to plug in the numbers because you had like certain figures there, so I thought that you would do that with the activity rate sometimes too. But it's
Never,
cool, I guess.
never. Got it? Never. So now, all right, so since we've worked on a basic one where we use one activity rate, labor hours, because we want to make sure that our C and B minus students can just knock this out. Now we're ready for the B plus and A students. We were ready for the B plus and A students.
I should give you a warning. I haven't had proper rest, so anything may come out. So
If you're making a lot of products and you got to be competitive, in this case, they're making an Excel CD, but making Word CDs, they'll be making PowerPoint CDs. So this is what the company is doing. So it is going to allocate the overhead, and it could be that same 50,000. Some of it's going to be based on setups. Some of it's going to be based on DVD burning. And some of it's going to be based on assembly, putting it in the case. And so rather than just using one number based on labor hours, they go and, they would do this research and the stats, regress things, use regression analysis, and say, well, we think that so much of the overhead is based on the number of batches we do of Excels DVDs versus other DVDs. So much of it is based on the machine hours. So much is based on the number of inserts in there. And so rather than just using one activity base, labor hours, they're using more than one. And so it's called activity-based costing. You got to have an accurate rate. So you got to break it down. So in a simple situation, yes, a couple of products, but when you got a variety of products that you're making and you're making more than DVD, you have to be precise because you got to appropriately cost it and sell it. And your cost has to be right because you are competing with other people. So activity-based costing has grown because overhead costs have increased once they were not that large. They're much more important, much larger. They no longer, go with direct labor hours. As we just ran it with that. Then you got diverse products. Some products produce in large batches, other small batches. So all of those things have to be taken into consideration. So each company looks at this and comes up with the way it is to do it. So let's go back to our last problem. And let's assume the 50,000 overhead is allocated two ways. Labor hours gets 40,000 of it. Machine hours get 10,000 other overhead. Okay. So Dawkins, I would always tell you these numbers. What's the overhead for labor hours and what's the overhead for hours? So I would give you that. Okay. So now we got that same 60 and 40, but we only using that to allocate 40. And we're going to use machine hours to allocate the. And in this case, the machine hours are 5 plus 5 equals $10,000. We're going to calculate an activity rate the same way. We're going to get total hours or whatever the activity might be, divided into the amount of costs allocated. And so now we have two activity rates, one for the labor hours and one for the machine hours. Any question on that? Any questions? Okay. So now we got to go back to this table again. But it's a little more complicated now. We have labor hours 60,040. We bring down our 0.4. So let's just look at product A. We bring down our 0.4 and we multiply 0.4 times 60. We got 24,000 of the overhead, the 40,000 amount going to product A. The other 60 are going to go to product B. Then we bring down our machine hours, multiply by 1. So 5,000 of the machine hours overhead is going to product A, 5,000 there also. So notice the total overhead is 40 for the labor hours, 10 for the machine hours. So we're still back at 50, but the amount of overhead is allocated differently. So now product A has 29,000 in overhead, product B has 21,000. Our production goals remain the same. And I think I jumped a step here. The 24 and the 5 are added. So the amount of the overhead going to product A is going to be 29,000. 16 and 5, so 21,000 on the product B. And with the production goals, notice that the overhead cost is 0.29 and 0.42. Those are our old overhead costs. Let's see real below. Let's see if I can find those. I think these were the numbers we'll copy. And okay, so you see the numbers change. Now you say that's not much, but if you're selling 10 million items, that's a lot. Okay, and of course, you know, these differences are just closed.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So activity-based accounting is just based on the concept that when you make something, instead of just using labor hours, you have to account for the machine hours and whatever else you're using that's part of the production. So it's not just like a single layer, it's like more than one thing going on.
Right. There's always more than one thing going on, but if I'm making something simple, it doesn't matter. But if I'm making Excel DVDs, and I'm making so many of those, then I'm making Word DVDs, then I'm making database and other DVDs, and then I'm making books and all kinds of other things. So they're working on virtual books and doing DVDs for them also. And so it's harder to work with the labor hours. And you think about accounting for the labor hours. If I'm accounting for the labor hours only, and if I were, then I have to have the labor hours for each batch. For Excel, how many labor hours? So I've got to then figure out a way for the employees to tell me how much they worked on labor hours. Well,
Billable hours, right?
yeah, but that's got to be inputted. So just think about your workers. They're filling out time cards. But now you want the time cards for how much they worked in produce, how much they worked in cereals. You want to know the cost, how much cost they were, how much cost they got on each aisle. Well, that's probably not important, but that's the kind of thing. You know, they couldn't just fill out a time report. They had to say how much they worked on each aisle in the store. If you wanted to say, okay, how much did this aisle costed me? And that just wouldn't be appropriate. More appropriate in this case was how many batches. A batch is, when you run 1,000 at a time, how many of those batches did you do? Then how many machine hours were involved in burning the DVDs? And then putting them in the cases. How many inserts went into the case? So that's what they came up with here. And so yeah,
So before we would just worry about one factor of production. Now we're like doing multiples and trying to figure out, okay,
because you're in, you're in competition with other people, and because you're in competition with other people, you got to have your costs exact. If you charge too much, you're gonna lose out the competition. If you don't charge enough, you're gonna lose money. Okay, so a lot goes into working with that. Okay, so let's go to our joint costing problem. Let's go to our joint costing problem. And just so you know, on this class assignment, Team 1 is responsible for Principles 1. Team 2 is responsible for Principles 2 book. Team 3 has the intermediate book. Team 5 has cost of goods sold. Team 6 has cost of goods manufactured. Team 7 has tax. Team 8 has the company books. Okay. So
that was Team 9 for the company books for support.
Team 9, right. And if I left you out, don't worry. I'll get to you on next week early. Okay, so don't feel left out.
So an intermediate is like what? Like a mixture of everything?
Yeah, Principles book.
It's the problem that the in-class problem is like broken up into sections.
Oh, okay.
Tax. Team 2, that should be the advanced. I guess I got a one right mind thinking about Principles 1 and Principles 2. So you got the advanced. Okay. You know what you got to pay attention to now. So this is our problem that we have now, where we have 4 books that we're making: Principles, Intermediate, Advanced, and Tax. These are the quantities that we're making. This is the cost of ink, this is the cost of paper, labor productivity, labor rate, selling price, labor hours. You don't have to worry about the machine hours in the example. So you just have to worry about the labor hour. So what I need to happen so you should have this insert. So the first thing that each team is going to do is calculate an activity rate. Let me go right here. Okay. So each team calculate activity rate just based on labor hours. Hopefully those activity rates will be the same. Unfortunately, GoToMeeting in my price range doesn't have breakout rooms. So eventually I have to shift, but to have breakout rooms, I have to start paying $400 a month rather than $400 a year. But that's a different thing. So each team, you get together now and calculate the activity rates. Once the activity rates are calculated, then the assigned teams will come through and calculate the unit cost, the unit overhead cost, principal, intermediate, advanced, and tax. Then they're going to come in here and calculate total unit cost, selling price, multiple, selling price, and predetermined overhead. So each book is doing this. Then after they do that, Team 9, you're doing all journal entries for the company. So when we make these 4 books, you'll be making the entries to purchase the ink and the paper. We're going to purchase the ink and paper for the company as a whole. I don't go around and separate it. I buy all my ink and paper at once. So you're making these journal entries for the company's books. Then we get to stage 2, the appropriate team who has principals, intermediate, advanced, and tax. They make these 3 journal, the stage 2 journal entries: ink, paper, labor, overhead. Then they go on to completed books and they make the transfer to finished goods. They go on to stage 4, books sold, and they make the journal entry to all the books. They would have applied overhead all the way through. So Team 9, here's your actual overhead. This is cash overhead. So you will be making this journal entry. Cost of goods manufactured team, once those teams get their work done, they're going to ship it to you. Then you're going to do the cost of goods manufactured based on that accurate and complete number. So you're just waiting on them to send it to you. Once you got it, you're ready to go. Cost of goods sold and gross margin. You coming in with sales price, taking out the cost of goods sold, the adjusted cost of goods sold, and gross margin. And we're just stopping at gross margin. So there's a company set of books. The company will make these journal entries. So, and these are your journal entries. Principal book, here are your journal entries. Intermediate book, your journal entries. Advanced book, here are your journal entries. Tax book, here are your journal entries. I think they kind of look the same. Transfer ink, transfer paper, record the labor, apply the overhead, make a transfer to finished goods, and then do your sales and your COGS and finished goods. You also got to post. So Team 9, I believe it is, when you buying that raw material, you got to post in here. Then when the raw material is used, the appropriate team is going to put that credit in here, and then they're going to fill out their working process. They're going to go ahead and post in here. So this is working process for principal. There's a working process for intermediate. There's a working process for tax. Then there's a finished goods for principal, a finished goods for intermediate, a finished goods for advanced, and a finished goods for tax. Only one cost of goods sold account, and only one manufacturing overhead account, which Team 9 is working with. For the sales, they got to put those sales in these. So we got 4 sales. So each team is putting their sales in. So this is what we're doing, the same thing that we've been doing, except now we have 4 books And so each team is doing a book and everybody's doing some part of this. Now, Doc, as you know where this is going, right? Eventually on that quiz you want, since you want to record. So we're
Oh
gonna have
no, I didn't ask for that.
so we have this quiz. So
Oh
each
my
team
God.
have 4 books and then they'll run through and do it. Just for you, Dawkins. I wasn't gonna give a quiz, but I'm just gonna give some homework. But because you want a
Oh
quiz,
my God, I don't want a quiz. Who said that? Who said that?
okay. So now all the teams, you should go through here and get this activity rate done. That's all 9 of you. But then those assigned teams are gonna come through here and make calculations and do this.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so
Okay, so ink is
how much is
what? It's 20 is 1 at 20. So
ink is
and
20?
then we have paper at 10.
What we're gonna do is this later.
Will we put the labor hours there, or will we put the labor productivity?
Cost of labor to make one item.
To make one?
Yep.
My math is failing me. What, $1?
Your math's failing you. So you didn't know 10 divided by 10 is 1. You're
Is
confident in that?
I don't know.
Okay. So remember, you either are multiply or divide. Come up with that unit labor cost. You either multiply or divide. So what's your total unit cost?
31.80
Selling price?
is 63.60. The selling price multiple is
It's 2.
yeah. You switched them. Yeah.
So this is supposed to be 2. What's your predetermined overhead rate?
Is 8.
Any questions by anyone? So each book is supposed to be doing this. With that, Team 9, you got your journal entries made yet? So Team 9, you all got to purchase the ink and the paper. So you need to make these journal entries and post them to the ledger. We'll let them work on that. So as they work on that, let's go to our journal entries for principles for the principles book. So what would your first journal entry be? So we're gonna back up here and look at the assumptions. Over the assumptions. Wait a minute. Over here, right. Okay, so they make those journal entries. So principles, you here, the bought 110,000 ink cartridges, you want 20,000 of them. They bought 90,000 ream paper, you want 20,000 of that. Your actual labor hours were 22. So each looking at this information and making and posting it to the ledger. Team 1, are we ready to continue?
Give me like 5 minutes.
Okay, so work on, and all the other teams should be going through and making these calculations. Intermediate, do you all have a selling price? That's all I'm asking. Advanced, do we have a selling price? And tax, do we have a selling price?
I do, but I'm not like confident if I got it right.
Why are you not confident?
I don't know, cause I'm just learning this.
Oh, so what you have a selling price for?
My selling price was
Which one?
for tax.
Okay.
If I can find it. Oh, okay. So my selling price was 584.
584. Anybody else on that team get 584? Well, yes, we'll see how that works. So each team is supposed to be coming in here making calculations. The next thing you do is you make a journal entries. So in terms of these items, there's a set of journal entries for principals. There's a set of journal entries for intermediate, set of journal entries for advanced, and a set of journal entries for tax. So you make the journal entries and then you post to the T accounts. When the T accounts are finally posted, then the team that's doing the cost of the manufacturer can go in there and with that information do the cost of goods manufacturer statement. So they're depending on you all getting the information done and posting and sending it on in. Yes, you got your group me, however you want to communicate it. There'll only be one grade on next class period for everybody who's in attendance. And only those people in attendance. When I take the roll. Okay. Are there questions by anybody? So you get your information. You get your information for your journal entries from the quantity information in here. The only dollar amount is here for the actual overhead. Otherwise, those quantities as you make your calculations. So did the Team 9 ever get me a journal entry for buying the raw materials?
Yes.
How much was the raw materials ink?
110,000.
It might have been more. Oh,
That's what it said.
okay. These are quantities. That quantity. So all of these are quantities in here except this number. So what you got to do, Holman, is go back up here in the assumptions and look at what they were paying for the ink and what they were paying for the paper. Okay.
Okay.
So work to get that done so you can have those entries made. And of course, this is the dollar amount, Holman, in terms of actual overhead. So Team 9 has 4 journal entries. They got to buy the ink, they got to buy the paper, they got to record the actual manufacturing overhead, and they got to do the over or unapplied overhead because they're going to get a T account with the overhead posted in. So for the overhead, the actual was 2. So you make that journal entry, post it here, and then there are going to be 4 credits in this account. Based on the information, you'll go ahead and make your determinations of the over and unapplied overhead. So in the actual company, that's how it works. Each company have accountants for each area, track of that area, and passing their information on. Any questions by anybody? Did we get the ink bought yet? Or did we use some ink yet?
Didn't you say we used like 20,000 of it?
Yeah, I think the assumption says 20,000 was used. 20,000 cartridges are how much? $20 each.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be how much money?
400,000.
Could be that 400,000. I'll take
Yeah,
your word.
Yes.
And how much paper?
200,000.
And then you would post these. So you've got to go to your work in process account and put 400,000 in here and 200,000. And you'd have a credit in here for 400,000. You got another journal entry for us?
I have the labor
How
and the
much?
manufactured overhead. Labor is 22,000 or 2,200 hours at $10 an hour.
So the labor is
22,000.
what's the overhead going to be?
17,600.
How'd you get
Because
7,600?
POR or activity rate of 8 times the actual labor hours of 2,200.
So that's 17,600. So now, work in process account, you add your 22,000, your 17,600. You're gonna come down here, overhead, and put in a credit for 17,600, and see each book will be doing this. Now, how many books were you supposed to make?
20,000.
How many did you actually make?
18,000.
So how much you gonna transfer out?
90%.
Well, I'll let you calculate that. So we've done most of it for you. So you see the process. You're doing the same thing, except you're doing it for 4 books. You're doing the same thing. So each person on the team has a book or something, depending on how many people on the team. So when you get your study problem, and I'll give the, I may get those
Um,
allocated.
I do have a question though. So for the manufactured overhead and the labor, would we be
Mhm.
using like usually you say like we use 100% of both and then 80% of the materials? Would we be using like the regular 90% for the materials that we're using for manufactured
Correct,
overhead and labor? Okay,
correct. And that's gonna vary by book.
okay.
So one team is fairly well there with everything done. So the next thing the team will do is transfer the finished goods. Then to do is sales and cost of goods sold and finished goods, and post those. And once the team does that, it sends that on. And they're done with their part. So what team has cost goods manufactured? What team has cost goods manufactured? One team has those. That is 6. So team 6, you got to gather up all of the information, put it in those T accounts. So I'll expect you to make sure all of that, what they send to you. So at the end of the day, you're responsible for all of those T accounts and making, getting information to me on a total basis. Well, not so much on a total basis, but you got to pull that information out of each T account and do the cost of goods manufacturer statement. And cost of goods sold picks up once they get this information. They go and they complete this. Okay, so.
This conference will now